A quick tutorial over how to add shading in a digital atmosphere. This is Digital Shading 101. I've got a portrait here that I've been working on, and this is what we're going to be using as our example. First thing I'm going to do, of course, is I'm going to make sure, number one, I've got an actual layer here dedicated just to my shadows. We put we put shadows on a different layer, of course, for the same reason that we utilize any layers in a digital realm, and that is, of course, to maintain the integrity of our artwork. I've got my colors down here on this layer here. The actual background itself has my lines. I've got my background set to a multiply layer because it is above everything else. Otherwise, if this were set to a normal blending option, you would not be able to see through to my colors even though they're on. So we're going to make sure that is set to multiply right now. That's only if your line work or image that you imported is on a separate layer from your colors and is above that layer. So that's why we're utilizing that multiply layer. We're going to use that same mentality with our shading here because let me jump in here and let's grab a nice shaded gray. We're going to go with kind of a medium to light gray here. All right. And what I want to do is that gray, let me show you here. Here's what the gray looks like right now. That's the way it looks. Now, the thing about using this blending option, right now my blending is set to multiply. Blending option is set to multiply. That's because right now, if I take that gray, and I'm going to just grab my move tool here. If I grab that gray and place it over anything else, because it's on this layer, whatever's on this layer, whatever color I use, is going to multiply by whatever color is underneath. So as I grab this and move it over anything, you can actually start to see where it's taking on the characteristics of the color behind it, which in this case behind it are these color layers here. As I move this up, hey, look at that. It actually applies that gray to the blue underneath and this flesh tone and the hair and everything, because that squiggle, that gray, is multiplying by every color underneath. Ooh, I just made a little bit of a boo-boo there. That happens sometimes. I grab my line layer. All right, so with that in mind, now that I know that everything on my shadow layer is going to be multiplied by what's underneath it, I've got my gray. I'm going to just Command A, Command X to get rid of it. And we now know that as I zoom in to start playing around with adding some shadow or shading to this painting, this digital painting, I now know that the gray that I have is going to essentially be the first value of shadow that I apply all the way across the board. So I'm going to shrink my brush down a little bit and give you an idea. Here inside of the ear, there it is. We got a little bit of shadow happening in there, right? Not bad. And we'll throw in for the actual ear canal itself. Now, if you want to utilize soft shading, which essentially is that gradient that you see happening right now, quickly, let me show you here. This is my current brush. You can see that it actually has softer edges. If I go up into my brush settings, this is the same for Photoshop, Photo P, the look of it anyway, but yeah, that's the look, because Photo P is basically a free version of Photoshop. If I grab the hardness slider and move it all the way up to 100%, now my brush is as hard edged as it's going to get. Take a look. See that right there? That right there is that indicator that lets us know a hard edge brush, which kind of looks like a felt tip marker. And then we've got our soft edge brush, which is a bit more like the traditional paintbrush that you're used to playing around with. So that's the difference here between soft and hard. And essentially, soft and hard edge, what we're doing here is we want to apply some sort of shading technique universally across our image. This is a bit more of a realistic portrait here, so I'm going to be going for a soft shade. That means I'm going to be using this softer edge right here. I'm going to get rid of those. And that means that my hardness is going to be all the way down here at the bottom, right? And you can see that I've already got that soft edge going in here. But again, if I want to make this a little bit darker, one of the cool things I can do here is grab my burn tool. That is traditionally the O key on the keyboard. When you activate it, make sure that the icon here inside of your toolbar is set to that little icon that looks like a hand holding it's pinching together, kind of like a hand would look if it were holding a match. That's the burn tool. Occasionally, if you hit the O a couple of times, you might end up sorting through the other options that are available to you here inside of that burn tool, like the sponge or the dodge. But we're going to be burning. So uh, I'm going to go down back into the ear canal, and I'm going to make sure that my brush is set to its softest, and it is because I'm maintaining that. And I'm just going to go over that gray a couple of times, and you start to see it darken, but it's not darkening fast enough. So let me change it from shadows. This is the range that is actually burning. I'm burning down a hue or a color. I'm going to go to midtones and see if that gives me what I'm looking for. And it is, look at that, nice soft burn so that it feels more like a gradient inside of that ear canal. I like that. I'm going to go back to my brush. And then I'm going to start applying my shadows to all of the consistent areas. In my mind, I see the light source coming from up here, right? We're going to go ahead and just boop. That's our light source. This is just for illustrative purposes. So if the light's coming from this direction, that means that all of my shadows are going to happen on the opposite side of that form. Because of the fact that the head is essentially a form, we want to incorporate that understanding by being universal in the distribution of our shading. That means, of course, that as the rounded objects actually move around uh, in space, at least, you know, by illustrative purposes here, for illustrative purposes, the light can't reach it, and our shadow is going to follow the fact that this is a curved object. Point to be made here, the neck. We're going to go ahead and start at his collar, and we're going to follow it up and curve it into the neck itself, because this is a rounded object, and we want to make it feel like it has some roundness to it, right? Behind the ear, there's going to be no light getting back here, and I'm just laying it down with this gray on a layer all by itself that is set to a multiply layer. So that means that all the gray that I put here is going to take on the properties of the color beneath it. So there we're getting some shadow on the back of the head, some shadings happening back there. Maybe we'll put a little bit behind this beard here, and the fact that the jaw casts a little bit of a shadow down onto the neck. And actually, we'll actually include the fact that, let's say that there's not going to be a whole lot of light getting down here to this neck either. So I might actually curve that into the neck as well. And just the front of his chest here into his neck is catching some light, right? And we can actually just we know that your cheeks create a little bit of a form as well. So the shadowing is going to curve around the cheek here as well into that beard, right? Underside of the nose, probably not getting much light. So let's go ahead and shadow that down too. In some cases, the underside of the lip as it wraps down into the split of the mouth won't catch very much light. How about underneath that bottom lip? That creates a bit of a lip shelf. We could even go in as far as talking a little bit about these areas under the eyes. The fact that the eye is a ball which pushes out of the eye socket is going to create a rounded form right here in the eye, in the eyelids. I'm going to make sure that my pressure sensitivity is set properly here for this shape dynamic. It is set to pen pressure. Okay. So that means that I should be able to lightly make a thin line. Yeah. See, we like that thin line. And then we'll add a little bit of pressure to create a little bit of a taper here in the shape of our shade or shadow. And then the whole underside of the eyebrow creates a bit of a shelf in the eye socket, protecting the eye, doing what it does best. And it's going to wrap around here into the eye socket, and we get some dimension there. It feels like that eyeball actually has a bit of dimension. And this is all creating a contour. A contour is essentially the edge of a shape from the edge of a form that creates shape. That's what contour is. A lot of people think makeup, but that's essentially what a contour is. A contour works with the form of the object to create a shape where its edge exists, and we know that the cheek wraps into the face, and because of that, we create this little shadow here, and that makes a bit of a contour. Same thing back here. We got a contour of the shadow itself as it wraps around back behind the ear. And here we have a cast shadow from the ear as it casts down onto the back of the head. And that creates a contour in the actual shade. So that's how that works. And I could go through here and keep on adding, but I'm going to end up adding some embellishments to this, so I'm going to stop there. So you get the idea of how shading works digitally. We talk about making layers specifically for that shadow so that we don't destroy the integrity of our original artwork. And we also covered essentially the difference between hard shading and light and soft shading. And we talked a little bit about how your form creates a contour in the edge of your shadow. Thank you very much for watching.